The sudden death of a spouse is traumatic. It compounds every experience. It turns upside down all the expectations of the surviving spouse that they can ever fathom or imagine. When widowhood becomes your reality, the adjustments are comprehensive and lifelong. It sets aside pretty much every idea that you have about what to expect in life, and obviously is an incredibly difficult and challenging moment. And yet life moves forward. The sun also rises the next day, even if it doesn't feel like it should, and it rises the day after that. Day by day we live our grief and move steadily away from that moment of death. Our grief shifts and it transforms and changes us as we bear that load. I'm really glad that you have joined us here at Journeys Through Grief. I invite you as we move forward in this to put your name in the chat box and maybe the name of your spouse or your person who has died. What we'll be talking about tonight will be helpful to anyone, no matter what it is, the loss that you've experienced. And in that box there, also tell us, how long has it been since your person has died? Here with us is Michele Amundson, whose husband, Tom, died unexpectedly over 15 years ago. Michele, I am very grateful that you have joined us, and I'm glad that you are sharing even just a portion of your story with us and the living your way through this that you have done. I'm so grateful to you and welcome.
First glitch. Hi. Hi, Galen. Nice. Thank you for having me.
Not a glitch. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Michele, you know, when you and I were talking about this, I mentioned to you that I remember where I was specifically. I can take you to the spot today when I learned that Tom had died. I remember the shock that I felt. His death was probably about the first of somebody that I felt really close to. And it really hit me very hard. My parents were still alive, and everybody else that I've lost since was still living. I'd like to kind of venture back there in your life and have you tell us about Tom's death and what that was like, because I know it was such a sudden experience for you.
Right. Tom, it was a Saturday morning. I mean, you know, I can go there so easily, and and just as an aside, knowing that I was going to do this and having to go back there, I usually kind of revisit that on the year, you know, but it was just kind of interesting thinking about it in a times when I don't usually think about it, you know, the exact event. But anyways, he Saturday morning, he woke up and he got up out of bed, and a few minutes later my son came running into the room saying, you know, Dad fell. And I went to him, and you know, we called 911. He was alive when he left the house. And you know, there's a lot of denial about it for me. I couldn't go in the ambulance for a number of reasons. So I went and I got a bag and I got my knitting and I got some water because I knew I was probably going to be at the hospital for a little while. And I even called a friend, said, you know, this is happening, you know, I just want to let you know. And I left the house. And when I got to the emergency room, my friend was there. Thank God. I was very happy. And Tom was dead. So yeah, it was shocking, you know. It was very shocking and very disconcerting and then there's a period where I kind of don't really remember what happened. There's a little period in there, but then I remember again pretty much everything.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. I find I find it interesting in all your response in the okay, let me gather these things together and stuff, that in some ways almost the normalcy of it. That's just, I just find that so fascinating.
I didn't, I just didn't, I didn't expect, who would expect that? And so I thought, well, there's something wrong. I mean, I was worried. I called 911, but I didn't bring my son to the hospital with me. And we've had to deal with that over the years.
Okay.
But because I just figured, and that was one of the reasons I called my friend, because I figured she could go pick him up, later if.
Sure.
But I just felt like, well, if I'm going to be sitting there in the emergency room, I could bring my knitting. And, I mean, it was just that thought of, that nothing was possibly going to be really wrong here.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of whacks you upside the head, and suddenly here you find yourself and having to deal with all that. Let me ask you, what was it that you did to sort of find your footing? In particular, that first little bit of that, but even through the first, couple of years and things, because I know something that is that sudden and that traumatic and that unexpected really has got to knock you for a loop and all. Is there something that really gave you a sense of support and strength during that time?
Yeah, I think there were a number of things. I mean, I had some very good friends, as did, Tom. Tom and I had some great friends, and they really showed up. Some of the people that I really expected to, not so much. Some of the people that I didn't expect to did. It was very interesting, especially in retrospect when I look back. But ultimately, I mean, really, when I got back to my house that day, the word had already spread, and there was probably 50 people in my house.
Wow.
And people just kept coming, and I'm not Jewish, but it was very it's sort of like what I imagine that sitting shiva is, where you just kind of keep the doors open. And it was like that for a couple of weeks. We had the actual memorial service 2 weeks later.
Okay.
Because he had family in Minnesota, and some people wanted to come in and stuff. So anyway, so people really, especially in those first 2 weeks, I was never alone. I was being fed because I wasn't eating, and my son was being supported too. Once those first couple of weeks were over, I mean, you had to get back. I had to get back because I had a 13-year-old son, and who was devastated, and had his own problems. So between the two of us, we really had a lot, we were grieving very differently and dealing with that. And I was working, and I didn't have a regular 9-to-5 job. I did weddings. So thankfully I didn't have a regular 9-to-5 job, because that would have been impossible. Trying to deal with that. And, but my friends, in the first few years after Tom died, I produced a couple stage readings of plays that friends sort of dragged me into, and I was in one of them. I really just tried to keep moving ahead in life. I got involved. I went for the first time to a gym, just because I knew that I just had to do something. I did a lot of different sort of things. But I also fell into a trap that I think not everybody falls into, but a lot of people do. And I drank a little too much for a few years. So while I was processing this, while I was being held, and while I was being supported, and while I was doing all these other things, I was also just drinking too much. I wasn't drinking during those things, but I would come home at night and drink, and
doing some numbing and things. Yeah,
definitely numbing. Because I was alone, you know, and when I was alone, I couldn't, you know, it was hard. It was very hard. So, so part of my story in this ensuing 15, 16 years is I stopped drinking after about 4 or 5 years, you know, and I really felt, I mean, I was only drinking at night and I was only drinking alone, but all of a sudden it hit me that it was a problem. So I just know that I know many other people that have had that same situation.
Sure. Yeah, I've heard that before too.
Yeah. And then and then after that, I started doing, working as a volunteer at a grief support center.
Okay.
Doing things like that. So I'm just kind of trying to give back, you know, like I got very involved in yoga.
Okay.
I mean, it's switched, you know, that sort of manic stuff sort of switched into more contemplative stuff. You know, I got a little bit softer and quieter and stuff. And yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. And was that, I don't know if you can answer this or not, but I'm curious about that. Chicken or the egg, which was it the shifting, like an internal shifting towards a more contemplative that moved you that direction? Or was it, oh, let me try this and do this, that then paid dividends interiorly?
No, I think it was that. I think it was the decision. I mean, really, a lot of it was had to do with the decision to stop numbing myself, because when that happened, you know, I kind of went a little bit through the death again. There was another sort of adjustment period that I'd kind of put off. And so I think it sort of naturally happened, you know, that was the way I started to deal with it in certainly a much more healthy way, you know. And also I felt like I needed to, if there was anything that I could do to help anybody else, I became much more personally available to talk to people and stuff. Like that. So.
All right. I you know, the reflecting on what you've just said and the different things that you've done, I find how amazing that is and how internal that is. And I really want to lift that up, because from what I get from you is that you didn't sit back and say, okay, I'm gonna figure this, or I'm gonna do this, other than like, hey, that's a problem and I need to change that. But these things sort of develop and evolve, if you will, to that this movement. And I loved what you said about when you stopped the numbing, that now all of that pain and the reality of it came back to the forefront again.
Right.
And I know that is a pretty common experience as well with folks. So it's a real encouragement to face the pain that we have, you know.
Rather than to keep putting it aside, or at least just give, you know, like I felt like I was giving myself a break, but I wasn't.
Right.
You know, I was just sort of, I mean, all the other things I was doing was giving me the break, being involved with people and doing projects. And that was the good stuff. This other thing, something I was layering on top of it that just made sense to me. But
it does in the moment.
In the moment, it did.
Yeah.
But, you know, I also had this 13, like, so that was years between like 13 and 17. With a son who just, you know, was, you know, wouldn't talk to me.
Yeah, teenagers are bad anyway and stuff. Exactly. And then you get a grieving teenager and somebody who's really close to their parents and having lost that boy, that's woo.
It was, yeah, so it was very lonely making, you know, and.
Yeah. Well, I'm moving forward a little bit and I'm curious. I know that you've been kind of enduring some health issues that come with the fact that was 15 years ago, and you know, and you're older now, and you've been through a pandemic, like the rest of us have, which is just layered stuff on top of us, especially those that are really in the raw and the early part of their grief and things. What has been your thoughts on engaging with the health issues that you've had and your aging and stuff without Tom, and those expectations that you would have of a spouse being there to share those things with you?
Yeah, you think about when you get married and it's for better or for worse, right? And
Yeah.
I'm going, hey, you know what? It's worse.
Where are you? Yeah.
Where are you? And I have a gallows sense of humor about stuff like that, because there's nothing I can do,
Right.
But yeah, the last couple of years have been pretty horrible for all of us.
Right.
For all of us. I mean, I think the amount of grief in the world, even with people who are not having personal grief, just residual, I just think this world is in grief right now.
Yeah, it really is.
And sometimes when I think about it like that, it'll make it easier for me in a weird way, because I feel like I'm not the only one, even though I'm alone in this apartment, or I was alone in this apartment for so much of COVID. I wasn't the only one who was alone in an apartment or a house or whatever, so I don't know. I don't think that's maybe not nice, but it was helpful.
Yeah.
But yeah, it certainly isn't what I expected at the end of my life, or moving towards the end of my life. And I was 51 when Tom died. We were both 51. So relatively young,
right.
So as I've aged, and had some health problems and stuff, I just have to keep moving forward. And the hardest part, the thing that I think, whenever I think about what would be the most helpful, I always think about the fact that he wouldn't stop, and I procrastinate like crazy. So he would have, everything that I'm going through, all the, if I do a test, or if I have whatever, I probably would have all, it would have all been taken care of, I'm sure. But it's hard to imagine it,
because it is so different, or
well, because he's not here and he hasn't been here for so long,
right.
So it's kind of hard to imagine. I mean, I can, and when I do think about it, I'm sure you've talked about it here. We all know those 5 stages of grief are baloney completely. I mean, yeah, right out the window. I've had some anger, like, just like I just did that, like, yay, where, where are you when my sister had to come, when I had to go have a little operation, where were you? He was supposed to be here for me. Many of my friends are moving out of town, have moved out of town. My closest friends, and that's what we were going to do. We were going to move out of town. We were looking up different places where we were going to go and get out of LA. And now, I certainly could have done it on my own, and was planning on it, was working towards it. And then COVID hit and all this stuff.
Yeah, everything's changed and stuff.
Everything's changed. So,
but it sounds to me like with various things that occur, life experiences, for whatever that may be, as you go through it, you still are going back and touching on that and experiencing, not the rawness or the immediacy of the loss when it happened, but what that loss means to you now. And there's another adjustment that has to be made. Would that be fair?
That's very fair. I think that it's a constant adjustment. I think I said to you at one time, that every once in a while, like I feel like I could just reach out my hand and hold his.
Yes.
He's he's with me. I never remarried or anything, not necessarily for lack of trying, but just because it was never right. And I, you know, I still feel like I'm married, you know? And so these things come, these bouts of sadness or whatever, but they're very tempered now. It's very tempered. And I think, you know, because I was thinking about that, you know, the way it comes to me now. And I really feel like, first of all, it's most of the good things that I really remember and really think about. And oftentimes it's a very surprising thing that will trigger something that will make me think of him. And whereas years ago, maybe it might have made me break down and cry. Now I might tear up and then I just say, well, thank you, and move on, you know? I mean, it's just, it's so different. And even going through health issues and doing that, you know, like I said, that anger arises. I'm not throwing things.
Yeah.
You know, I just, damn it, you know?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah.
It, you know?
This disappointment. That's kind of what I hear. Yeah.
Yeah. More than, you know, it's like it's like something I have to carry and something I have to do.
Sure. And
I wouldn't, and I'm maybe not always happily carrying it, but I'm carrying it because to not have had that relationship with Tom would have been far worse than anything that's come since he died. Even that he died, you know, I can't imagine it. That would be the most devastating thing.
To have not had that.
Have not had that.
Yeah.
So, you know, everything is tempered around that.
I love that word. I love that word, how you use that, tempered. Yeah, because, you know, tempered is something that's strengthened. It's something that's hardened. It's something that's been through the fire.
Yeah.
You know, to put it that way. And it's something that's eased as well in some ways. I think there's such a rich word that you use there, in that as you are, you know, continue to live and move forward in this.
Yeah, and I think it's also you know, there's a resilience there and stuff, you know, because you know, I mean, I'm moving forward, you know, I mean, life hasn't stopped, so
yeah,
you know,
it certainly could have in some ways. Yeah,
sure. I mean, you know, and certainly could have, but it wasn't going to, you know. I mean, I have, you know, I just kept moving forward. Yeah.
The sun rose, and you've got a 13-year-old that need to go to school, and you know, all that stuff that is partly distraction, but it's stuff also that brings you back into a relationship with the everydayness and, you know, the mundaneness, if you will, of life. You've got laundry, you got all that stuff, and it's can be pointless and all, but after a bit, as you're moving through that, it's, you know, that especially early on, it helps to propel you into the next day. Right.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Every day was hard to get up, but then I had to do this and I had to do that. And then there was this, and then there was that. And then 2 years had gone by, and then 5 years had gone by. And then, oh my God, has it really been, you know, 16 years? You know, it's very weird when I think about it that way, because I can think about that and I could still go, no, it was just last week. But not really.
But not, I mean, time gets that elastic sort of.
Yeah, it does. It's like very, it's very elastic. And, you know, it's interesting how that, and then when you see how elastic it can be around one thing, then you can see how elastic it is around so many other things too.
Sure. It's just got this weird quality to it and stuff when you mix yourself in. So well, I'm wondering, you know, the dailiness, the mundane, the stuff that goes on and things, what are some of the ongoing habits and practices that you've developed over the years to really strengthen yourself within your own self and your stability in that, as you've gone forward? What helps to ground you as you?
I think after those first years, what grounds me is, for a long time, it was the service that I was doing and giving and in doing the grief groups and stuff. But also I found yoga, and my whole history with yoga since that time has been ongoing and moving, and has turned into a practice that, that totally grounds me, that keeps me focused, that keeps me sane. And I'm not talking about physical yoga. I'm talking about yoga, meditation, like that. On a more, sort of on a more spiritual sense,
Okay.
So that's making a difference for me.
Good. Yeah, you found something in that solidifies you. Those are going to use the word stability with that. And centers. I know that's a big part of what yoga is, and really any spiritual practice that is really important to us will center us and ground us in a moment, and being, for lack of a better word, being present in that then really does help us to respond and build the resilience that you spoke about so beautifully earlier.
Right. I think that it really has. But I do want to say that at the time of Tom's death, if anybody had said to me, well, whatever, anything spiritual, they would have joined him,
Yes.
I did not want to hear it.
Yeah, right.
I didn't. I felt cheated, and I felt like the universe was not my friend, that, so I just feel differently now, and that's through work that I have done. But also I think that, again, that sort of molding and that tempering that just happens over time and changes things. And
comment about your would have helped somebody to join Tom if they'd have said something like that. C.S. Lewis has a wonderful way of saying that anybody that ever talks about and then start, about, heaven or afterlife or something too early has not ever done this in the way that is meaningful on such a level to the person who has experienced the death. Right. That it just, the words are, they just are loud and cacophonous. They don't do anything for anybody.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel that. Although there are people that, do rely on that, and they're okay with that right away.
Right.
I think we're all, so different, but the kind of things like, he's in a better place, and you just want to go, no, right here on the couch next to me, better place,
better place.
Please stop it, and but it's hard, and I'm certain, if anybody who is listening to this, people say stupid things to us, and they don't know that they're doing it. And in retrospect, I can see that some people I gave a lot of space to do that. And I would say to them something like, no, honey, really, I would much rather have him here. Yeah. But some people, who, I went across the table at a woman one time who was comparing her horrible divorce to Tom's death. Ooh. And right in front of her child. And I was like, I would have punched her. We would have had a fight in this restaurant, but I was so mad. And you know, you just have to, we're asked to do so much in that very tender time.
Wow.
Plus, we're also asked to hold other people's sorrow and grief. And it's an impossible thing. And looking back, I can see that more clearly. And also leading those grief groups for so long just helped me really, really
Sure.
like that, because I could, you know, I remember people would be talking about it, and, you know, I couldn't say anything because, but yeah, wow, you know, and it really, it just happens to us all. And,
Yeah.
you know, I guess we figure out we can allow for a little space or grace when we can.
Right. Yeah. And grace to ourselves and to someone else. Yeah. That, I think that serving other people and helping them to you know, express, release, you know, their loss, or even if it's not in a grief group like you you know, found your way to and everything, but serving other people and helping to make their lives better, or serving the world in some way, whatever it is. That's always one of the great pieces that can help folks move through their loss, and you know, when they're ready for it, the rawness of it, and begin to
Right.
rebuild some things.
Absolutely. I cannot say enough for that. You know, I imagine, you know, with my last breaths, I'll be trying to do something somewhere, but send a postcard off to on a political thing, or, you know, or help or teach yoga to somebody or whatever. I mean,
Right.
I just can't imagine at this point not doing that, because it helps me so much.
Right. Yeah. Giving ends up helping us so much that it's almost that we end up with more than what
Right.
the other one does. And you know, let me just kind of have you touch quickly on kind of one last question. You sort of have done this throughout, and I've really appreciated that, but I want to see if if you can encapsulate this. The identity of widow got thrust on you, you know, like that. How has that changed over time? And is that something that you use for yourself, or whatever? Is that an identity that you have for yourself, or do you still wrestle with that at times, or what's that like?
Well, first of all, you know, when I go to the doctors or when I go to the DMV or wherever you go, there's a place to mark your marital status, and widow is one of your choices.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always, you know, thrust on me.
Yeah.
Whether I want it to be or not. But I don't have a problem with it. I did, you know, I did for quite a while at the beginning, but I don't have a problem with it. And I've been, you know, we had talked a little bit about that, and I was kind of trying to really figure out exactly why, and I'm not really sure why. You know, I think some people do, and some people don't. I mean, I feel like I'm still married, you know, like I didn't leave him, or, you know, divorce. It wasn't a divorce situation. It wasn't, you know, I have never been divorced. I don't know if divorced people still sometimes maybe feel like their first husbands or wives or something were there. I don't know, you know, but I feel like I feel like so widow is a better word than single, you know.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I don't feel single.
I see you still kind of it's working around with that, and I find that really cool.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that. It's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And again, such a highly personal one, and all, and you know, there's so many identities that are forced upon us, or people expect of us, or something. And I really just appreciate your wisdom of the juggling of it, to put it that way. It's kind of the way I hear you working with that. And sometimes yes, sometimes no, and yeah, but not, and ambiguity of it. I find so rich and healthy, actually.
Yeah.
It's hard, but sometimes. But
I don't have it doesn't have to be, there doesn't have to be a straight answer for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't believe in straight answers for anything, quite frankly. So
the world's pretty complex.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Who knows what's going to happen, tomorrow? This world is very complex. And there's some things I'm glad he hasn't seen. I think about that sometimes. I've because I think about things, something will happen, or I'll see something funny or whatever, and I'll think, oh my God, Tom would have just died laughing at that, or something. Or, oh, he would have loved to have gone to that wedding, or this or that. And I feel the same way about other things, except I'm so glad he didn't have to see that.
Yeah. Saved him that suffering with that, I mean,
and
put it that way.
And he would have suffered. He was a good man. He was a good guy.
Yeah, he was a good egg. Very, very funny. Michele, thank you so very much for joining us. This, again, I just keep using the word rich, but it is such, you have such a rich wealth of wisdom and experience, and I am so truly grateful for your openness and vulnerability to share it with our community here.
Well, thank you for asking me. I appreciate that you're doing this, and I also appreciate a chance to get out of my own stuff and do a little service from my living room couch tonight.
Yeah, still helping. Thank you so much. And to you who have been watching and are a part of this, thank you for being here as well. Follow us on Facebook if you're not already one of our followers at Journeys Through Grief. We will have another one of these next month, and the ones that we've done before are archived there in the video section. There's just a lot of really good, helpful stuff there, and all. And we're just really glad as well that you have found us here on Journeys. I want to thank Jessica for, again, monitoring our feed and being so supportive and helpful of the work that we're doing. And we at Journeys Through Grief send you peace as you grieve your loss. Thanks, and take care.